It all started 6 months ago, though I didn't realize it then. I was just another mid-level project manager working 50-hour weeks at Silverbyte Solutions, a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle. My name is Jason Carter, and for years I kept my head down and worked harder than most. But working hard doesn't always mean getting noticed, at least not when someone like Brandon Ellis is around. Brandon was slick. He always wore tailored suits, always knew the right thing to say to upper management, and somehow managed to charm his way into every major meeting. I didn't hate him, not initially. He was senior to me and, at least outwardly, seemed supportive. But there was something about the way he hovered when I was presenting, or how he always insisted on reviewing my decks before forwarding them to leadership. At first, I took it as mentorship. The office itself was sterile. White walls, blue partitions, and the constant hum of fluorescent lights. Our team shared a glass-walled corner, which offered no privacy, only performance. Every movement could be seen. Every whisper was heard. The first sign that something was off came during a Friday morning stand-up. I had spent the entire week refining a new customer retention strategy based on user behavior data I'd analyzed in my own time. I was excited. I sent Brandon a preview the night before and asked him if he'd look it over before I shared it in the meeting. He didn't respond. So, I was surprised when, at exactly 9 a.m., Brandon opened the meeting and began presenting the strategy as if it was his own. He stood at the front, with the confidence of a TED speaker, using my exact words, my metrics, even my phrasing. Our new approach, he said, pointing to my charts, will reduce churn by 18% based on projected behavioral adjustments across segmented user types. My throat went dry. I looked around at the team, wondering if anyone noticed. Carlos, who had seen me working on it, gave me a puzzled glance. But no one said anything. Not even me. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Maybe he was just speaking on behalf of the team. Maybe he planned to mention me later. But he didn't. He closed the laptop and smiled like a king returning from war. The worst part? Mr. Whitman, our elusive CEO, happened to drop in toward the end of the meeting and praised Brandon directly. "Great initiative," he said. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need." Brandon just nodded and said, "Just doing what I can." That weekend, I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment over and over, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. But something had shifted. A quiet betrayal had occurred, and the seed of doubt was planted deep inside me. On Monday, things returned to normal. Brandon was unusually friendly, patting my back, complimenting my work ethic. I wanted to say something, but how? What could I prove? There were no emails, no witnesses, just my word against his charm. Still, something inside me changed that week. A little voice that once said, "Be patient," started whispering, "Watch closely." I decided not to confront him. Not yet. Instead, I started saving everything. Emails, drafts, voice memos, document history. If he tried it again, I'd be ready. And as fate would have it, he did try again. It started with the smallest things, barely noticeable if I hadn't been paying such close attention. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was just being paranoid, I told myself. Maybe I was reading too much into casual comments or fleeting glances. But day by day, the signs started stacking up. It began on a Wednesday morning during the department meeting. My manager, Gary, walked into the room with that smug grin he wore like a uniform, equal parts charm and ego. The team sat around the oval table, waiting to hear the weekly status update and discuss the new client project we'd landed. The same one I had stayed up 3 nights straight preparing the pitch for. The same one I had spent my weekends refining down to the last detail. Gary pulled up the slides on the projector. They were mine. Word for word. Graphic by graphic. Font choices. Flow. Even the title page still had the placeholder I had left in when I emailed the draft to him. Presentation_draft_B_V3_nail maybe. He didn't even bother changing the name. And yet, he stood at the front of that room like he had created the entire thing from scratch. He spoke with confidence, fielding questions from the VPs like it was his own genius fueling the project. He used phrases I had coined, quotes I had cited. Even a joke I had inserted at the top of slide 4. No mention of me. Not even a glance in my direction. I looked around the table. Did anyone else notice? Erin caught my eye briefly, her brows furrowed slightly. But she quickly looked away. I tried to tell myself, maybe Gary just forgot to mention my name. Maybe he was under pressure, and it slipped his mind. But deep down, the pit in my stomach told a different story. Over the next few days, I started seeing it more clearly, like pulling the curtain back on a stage and seeing the strings behind the puppet show. Emails forwarded to executives had my ideas, but with Gary's name in the signature. My reports were being reformatted and resent from his account. Clients started addressing him directly with follow-ups on things I had initiated. It wasn't just a one-time oversight. It was a pattern. He was slowly, methodically stealing my work and claiming it as his own. I began to spiral internally. Every time he smiled at me or dropped a casual, nice job in the hallway, it felt like a taunt. A reminder that he could rob me in plain sight, and no one would bat an eye. Every polite nod he gave me in meetings turned my stomach. I started dreading every interaction with him. My work, once a source of pride, started to feel like a trap. Like I was just feeding the machine that was chewing up my effort and spitting out credit with his name on it. One afternoon, I walked into the break room just as two of my colleagues, Devin and Jess, were whispering in the corner. They stopped talking the moment they saw me, exchanging that guilty glance that says everything without a word. "What's up?" I asked, forcing a casual tone. Devin hesitated. "Oh, just talking about the Simmons account. The one I had been leading for the past 2 months. Gary's taking over that now, right?" Jess added too quickly. I blinked. "What?" She backpedaled. "I mean, that's what I heard. That he's the new point of contact." My throat tightened. "Since when?" They exchanged another look. "We thought you knew," Devin said. I didn't. But now I did. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every little moment that now seemed suspicious in hindsight. Every time he asked me to CC him. Every time he said he'd handle the follow-up. Every time he made a point of having lunch with a VP right after I submitted a major deliverable. He was building his success on my back. Brick by stolen brick. I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something I could show, not just whisper about. So I started collecting. I archived all my original drafts, timestamped, and saved in cloud storage. I set my inbox to auto-BCC myself on emails I sent him. I kept notes of every project milestone, including when I submitted what and to whom. I even began casually recording Zoom meetings on my personal computer when I discussed ideas with him, just in case. At first, I felt sneaky, almost guilty. But the guilt was quickly replaced by something colder: resolve. The tension between us grew silently. He must have sensed something was off, though he never addressed it directly. He continued playing his role perfectly, smiling, confident, charismatic in meetings. Meanwhile, I played mine polite, cooperative, invisible. But inside, I was unraveling. Every interaction became a test of restraint. Every polite nod I gave him was covering a scream. Every "sure, I'll get that to you" was a mask for my rising fury. The worst part wasn't even the theft. It was the betrayal. I had trusted Gary. When I first joined the company, he had taken me under his wing, told me he saw potential in me, encouraged me to push myself. I had thought of him as a mentor. And now? He was using everything I gave him to climb a ladder he never deserved to touch. One morning, I arrived early and overheard him on a call in the hallway just outside his office. "I've got it handled," he was saying. "Yeah, she's solid. Smart kid. Just needs a little polishing. I'll keep feeding her projects. Use what's good, clean up the rest. She's not management material yet, but she's useful." My stomach dropped. Useful. Like a tool. Like a printer. Like a machine that spits out documents for him to sign. I backed away quietly before he noticed me and sat at my desk, staring at my monitor, numb. That was the moment the last thread snapped. This wasn't just about work. This was personal. He didn't see me as a colleague. He saw me as a resource to exploit. I clenched my fists under the desk and made a silent vow. He was going to regret underestimating me. I started planting seeds, small, deliberate details that would eventually paint a larger picture. I spoke up more in team meetings, subtly referencing my last report or the campaign I launched last quarter. I scheduled one-on-ones with HR and started asking questions about intellectual property rights and project attribution. I volunteered to lead new initiatives, but made sure my name was stamped clearly on every deliverable. And I watched him squirm. The more I asserted myself, the harder he had to work to maintain the illusion that he was the one running the show. He started micromanaging, snapping at colleagues, making careless mistakes. I wasn't paranoid anymore. Now I had power, and I was going to use it, but the time to strike hadn't come just yet. No, I was going to wait until I had everything. Wait until I could pull the curtain back in front of the entire room. Wait until the only sound left was the echo of his downfall. And that moment was coming soon. It happened on a Wednesday. I still remember the taste of burnt coffee lingering in my mouth as I stared at my screen, the cursor blinking like a silent metronome, keeping time with my rage. That was the morning I stumbled onto the email chain. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just routine follow-ups on the budget forecast I'd submitted the week before. But there it was, a forwarded thread from the regional manager, sent accidentally to me instead of another team lead. I scrolled past the pleasantries and froze. There it was, my presentation deck. Every chart, every insight, every line of my strategic forecast, copied word for word. But it wasn't my name at the bottom of the slide. It was Lucas's. I blinked, hoping I had misread. But there was no mistake. He had removed my name and inserted his own. Even the title slide had been rebranded with his personal logo, Initiatives by Lucas Shaw. He had stripped my voice from the deck like it was some secondhand coat he'd found at a thrift shop. The email thread that followed between him and the regional manager was even worse. Lucas was congratulated on his sharp insights, praised for a fresh approach and critical forecasting skills. He had replied humbly, of course, pretending it was a team effort, but he made sure to soak up every drop of praise like a man dying of thirst. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, heart pounding, staring at the betrayal in plain text. The next few hours were a blur. I couldn't focus, couldn't breathe. I kept hearing his voice in my head, laughing over beers with the team, telling them he was born for leadership. How he had once said, "Some of us have it. Some of us don't." He always made it sound like he was joking. But I remembered the smirk, the condescension, the way he'd correct me in meetings to reframe my ideas as his. It all came crashing back now, 1,000 paper cuts that I had ignored. Until now. I debated going straight to HR, but something stopped me. This wasn't just about a stolen deck. It was about a pattern, a long game I hadn't realized I was a pawn in. So instead, I started digging. That night, I stayed late at the office, the cleaning crew mumbling greetings as they passed me vacuuming around my desk. I pulled together every file, every draft, every digital breadcrumb that proved I was the original author of not just that deck, but several others, projects Lucas had supervised over the past year. Each time, the pattern was the same. He'd act attached when we were brainstorming, claiming he was trusting my instinct, then swoop in at the last moment, polish a line or two, and pitch it to leadership as his vision. I'd never minded, back then. I thought it was part of the mentorship process. I thought he believed in me. What a fool I was. But I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. I started documenting. Every email, timestamped drafts, chat logs. I even exported version histories from our shared cloud folders. I cross-referenced submission dates, internal approvals, and meeting notes. The evidence began stacking up like a silent army behind me. And the worst part? It wasn't just my work. I found other names, quiet contributors who had long left the company or burned out into silence. Names buried in revision notes or early brainstorming files. Lucas had been climbing a ladder made of stolen rungs. The next day, I walked into the office with a different kind of energy. My shoulders squared. My chest lifted. I knew something Lucas didn't. And I planned to use it. In the weekly strategy meeting, Lucas presented my deck to the executive board. I watched him closely. He didn't fumble. He didn't even sweat. He was polished, confident, even charming as he rattled off projections I had labored over for weeks. I wanted to vomit. After he wrapped up, the VP nodded approvingly and turned to me. "Anything to add, Jamie?" I looked at Lucas. He smirked. That same smug smirk. The one that had always made me feel like a footnote in my own career. And I smiled back. "Actually, yes. I'd like to share some background on how this model was created. I think transparency is important when it comes to how we reach these conclusions." Lucas shifted slightly in his seat, but said nothing. So I continued, slowly, calmly, walking them through the original draft, which I'd printed and marked with metadata and revision timestamps. I explained the thought process, the rationale, and even included voice memos from initial brainstorming sessions. By the time I was done, the room was silent. Lucas looked like someone had poured ice water down his back. "Wait," the VP said, holding up a page. "You're saying you created this? All of this?" I nodded. "And not just this one. There's more. I have files going back over a year showing this pattern." They asked me to stay behind after the meeting. Lucas was asked to step out. I laid out everything. It took nearly 2 hours. When I left the boardroom, my heart was racing, my palms sweaty, but for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. I had spoken the truth. I had finally stood up for myself. The next morning, HR launched a formal inquiry. Within 48 hours, Lucas was suspended pending investigation. He didn't return to the office after that. Rumors spread quickly. Some said he was caught stealing confidential data. Others whispered about lawsuits. I kept quiet. I didn't need to gloat. Justice had begun to unfold on its own. But the moment that sealed it all for me came a week later. I was walking through the lobby when I saw him. Lucas, standing near the reception desk, holding a small cardboard box. His desk plant, a few framed certificates, and a stress ball poking out the top. His badge was already clipped by security. Our eyes met. He looked tired, deflated, smaller somehow. I nodded once. He didn't return it. He just turned and walked out. And just like that, the man who had spent years climbing on the backs of others walked out of the building alone, with nothing. I didn't plan the confrontation. It wasn't some grand scheme or perfectly executed revenge fantasy. It just happened. It was Friday morning when I was summoned to the boardroom. The very same boardroom where Darren had stood so many times before, presenting my strategies, my designs, and my hours of unpaid overtime as his own stroke of brilliance. But this time, I wasn't sitting silently in the corner, taking notes. I wasn't invisible. I was the one presenting. Darren sat near the end of the long glass table, flanked by 2 unfamiliar faces in expensive suits, the external consultants from corporate. His smug face had drained of color the second I walked in with the final report. "Morning, everyone," I began, forcing my voice not to tremble. "Let's go over the implementation breakdown for the new system. The one I developed." I didn't say we. Not the team. Just me. And the best part? I had proof. Screenshots. Metadata logs. Internal emails. A quiet but precise collection of receipts I'd kept over months of being dismissed. Darren shifted in his chair. "Actually, I was under the impression that you'd take the credit again?" I said, looking him straight in the eyes. "That won't work this time." There was a moment of absolute silence in the room. I could hear the soft ticking of the wall clock behind me. My breath. My heartbeat. The consultants glanced at each other, then one of them leaned forward. "Would you care to elaborate, Mr. Singh?" the taller one asked Darren. Darren opened his mouth. Closed it again. He looked to me, then back at the suits. There must be a misunderstanding," he stammered. "We worked on this together, obviously. It was a joint effort." I shook my head. "No, it wasn't. He actively told me not to share progress with the team. Said he'd package it better. He meant presented himself. Every line of code, every timeline projection, it's all mine. I have the backups, the timestamps, the files. You're welcome to audit them." He snapped. "Why are you doing this? You trying to make me look bad?" I paused and tilted my head. "You did that all by yourself." Darren turned red. "You're twisting this. This is some personal vendetta. I mentored you. The room practically vibrated with the tension. I stood firm, my voice low but sharp. You mentored me? I said, voice cracking just slightly under the weight of disbelief. You exploited me. Every late night I stayed. Every weekend I skipped rest. You told me it was part of the grind, and then stood in front of the company and soaked in applause while I sat in the back like a ghost. You diminished me, Darren. Repeatedly. I was good enough to build it, just not good enough to be seen. He scoffed, eyes darting to the executives as if begging them to believe him. This is a betrayal. I gave you a chance. I stepped closer, gripping the edge of the chair in front of me. No, you gave me a cage with a glass wall. You wanted me quiet, grateful, and invisible. Then came the moment I didn't expect. One of the consultants leaned back, arms crossed. We've reviewed both sets of documentation. Your work, Darren, is thin, to put it mildly. It appears nearly everything originated from Evelyn's system folders, including the initial prototypes. I looked down, hiding my smile. What? Darren muttered, panic creeping into his voice. Effective immediately, the consultant continued coldly. You're being placed on unpaid leave pending internal investigation. Security will escort you to your office. If this data misrepresentation is confirmed, we'll be pursuing appropriate legal action. He looked completely stunned, as if this outcome had never occurred to him, as if consequences were something that happened to other people, not him. I didn't think she'd. You didn't think I mattered. I finished for him. His mouth opened again, but no sound came out. The silence felt like justice. As he stood, still sputtering, still confused, I felt the burn of years of quiet resentment lift off my chest. Then came the twist. Just as security arrived to walk him out, he looked at me, eyes not full of hatred, but regret. I never thought you'd turn on me like this. I thought you looked up to me. I did, I replied. And then I saw who you really were. And with that, he was gone. The boardroom emptied slowly, people nodding at me with respect I'd never received before. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood in that room alone for a few moments after everyone had left, breathing in the silence. I had finally spoken up, and the man who had silenced me for years was now the one nobody would listen to. The moment the truth came out, it didn't erupt like a thunderstorm. It crept into the office like a slow, cold fog, thick, undeniable, and chilling. After the HR department confronted Darren with the evidence, there was no dramatic shouting, no furious tantrum, just a long, terrifying silence as he sat across the table from me, blinking as if the reality refused to settle on him. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. And maybe he didn't, because the version of me he had grown comfortable exploiting was gone. The silence between us was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Within hours, the office grapevine began buzzing. Whispers floated through cubicles and over coffee machines. People gave me nods of solidarity, cautious smiles. Some even came up to quietly say, "It's about time." I didn't respond much. I wasn't basking in the moment. It all still felt surreal. Darren was placed on administrative leave pending a formal investigation. But even that was a formality. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could have said. Timestamp designs, revision history logs, emails I was conveniently left off but later discovered, and testimonies from a few brave colleagues who had seen him lifting my work. Still, even in vindication, I felt something unexpected, a hollow ache. I should have felt victorious, empowered, relieved. But all I felt was tired, because it hadn't just been Darren. It had been every time someone smirked when I pitched an idea. Every time I was interrupted mid-sentence. Every time I saw someone else getting credit while I was told to be a team player. Darren's downfall was just the tip of an iceberg I had spent years crashing into. In the weeks that followed, things changed, but not all at once. I wasn't promoted overnight. No confetti rained down. But I noticed little shifts. People listened more closely when I spoke. Emails came addressed to me directly. And eventually my manager, Darren's boss, called me in for a meeting.
Her tone was different this time.
Respectful. focused. We're restructuring, she said, folding her hands over her notepad. We've been observing your leadership and the team trusts you. We'd like to offer you the position Darren held. I sat back in the chair, the same seat where I had once been criticized for not having leadership energy. I smiled, not wide but steady. I accept, I said. And just like that, the tides had turned. A month after his termination, I saw Darren again. It was in the most unexpected place, a small startup event downtown. I had been invited as a panelist. He had not. He was sitting alone near the back, clutching a worn leather portfolio, scanning the crowd like he was looking for a lifeline. Our eyes met. He got up and approached slowly, cautiously, like someone tiptoeing across ice they knew could break. Hey, he said, voice soft. You look good. Thanks, I replied curtly. He gave a weak chuckle. You're on the panel tonight?
Yeah. A pause.
Then, I'm between jobs. I nodded. He didn't deserve sympathy, but I also didn't want to rub salt into a wound. He had already done that to himself. You know, he added, I always knew you were good. Maybe too good. That's not what you said back then. He looked down. Yeah, well, I was insecure. You intimidated me. There it was. The truth, finally. He had seen my potential long before I had seen it in myself. But instead of nurturing it, he buried it. Smothered it. Tried to absorb it like a parasite, hoping to mask his own inadequacies by feeding on mine. I just wanted to succeed, he mumbled. So did I said. The difference is, I didn't have to steal from anyone to get there. He looked like he wanted to say more, but I walked away. I had a mic to hold, a room to address, a future that was finally, unquestionably mine. But that wasn't the end. Weeks passed. I began leading a team of my own. We restructured workflows, encouraged transparency, and made it a point to credit everyone for their contributions. One morning, I received an anonymous email. No name, no greeting, just a single sentence. Watch your back, he's not done. Chills ran down my spine. My fingers hovered over the mouse, unsure what to do next. Was it a joke? A scare tactic? Or was Darren still out there, trying to claw his way back with desperation turned vindictive? I deleted the email, but it stayed with me. Later that week, I noticed a LinkedIn profile that had recently viewed mine. No photo, no name. Just a dummy account. Then a recruiter mentioned they had received a reference call about me from someone posing as a former colleague. I knew. It was him. He couldn't let it go. He couldn't stand the idea of me rising while he fell. And yet, despite his pettiness, despite his attempted sabotage, I stood unfazed. Because now I wasn't the same. I had receipts. I had credibility. I had a circle of people who had watched the truth unfold, and they weren't easily fooled anymore. Still, I began locking my screens more frequently. I changed passwords. I watched shadows a little more carefully. Some ghosts don't haunt places. They haunt names, memories, inboxes. But here's the twist you didn't see coming. Months later, I received a package. No sender listed. Inside was a notebook, one I hadn't seen in years. It was mine. My old sketchbook. The one I thought I had lost. The pages were dog-eared, but intact. My early prototypes, my raw thoughts, some scribbled diagrams that would eventually become the foundation of our company's biggest project. At the back of the notebook was a note, scribbled in shaky handwriting. I found this buried under my old desk. Thought it belonged to you. Sorry for everything. You were always better than me. There was no name, but I didn't need one. I held the notebook in my hands for a long time, unsure what I felt. Victory? Closure? Pity?
No.
Just release. He was gone. Not just from the company, but from my psyche. His grip had loosened. I didn't need revenge anymore. He'd already sentenced himself to a lifetime of regret. And as I placed the notebook back on my shelf, something inside me shifted. For the first time in years, I looked at my own work, not as something to defend or protect or prove, but as something to be proud of. He took credit for my work. Now, the world knows the truth. And him? He's just a footnote in the story I now own completely. Funny how the man who tried to erase me is now the one no one remembers.